Everyone loves the brave heroes. And before you think this story is about someone who was born fearless, let me tell you something. Bravery is not something you're born with. It is something you become. But what if I told you that bravery doesn't always feel like bravery? Did you know that the bravest people in history very often were terrified on the inside? But what made them brave is that they stood firm to the very end. Saint Joan of Arc is one of the bravest women who ever lived. Everyone knows how her story ends. A young girl, burned at the stake, condemned by the very people she fought to protect. As you can see, it's not exactly the type of hero that is talked about nowadays. But today, here with you, I'm not going to talk about how she died. I'm here to talk about how she stood. How a simple girl faced powerful men, accusations, and even death without ever denying, not for the least bit, what she believed in. Now you might ask, was she scared? Probably. But what made her invincible was something greater. Now Saint Joan, at the age of 19, she faced unimaginable difficulties. She was imprisoned for over a year after being captured in battle, condemned to death, and abandoned. This is the hardest part, by the people she fought for. Yet, despite all that terror, she endured. So now, with my trusted magnifying glass, we are going to discover the secret of Saint Joan's bravery. And maybe by the end of this story, you too will realize that you were made for bravery also. Now let's go back to the year 1431. The cold stone walls of the castle prison in Rouen closed in on Saint Joan. For months, she had been locked away, far, far away from those familiar fields of Domremy and the soldiers who once followed her. Her enemies, they thought by keeping her in isolation, that would completely break her. They believed fear would silence her. Saint Joan's capture marked the beginning of her ordeal as she was sold to the English and forced to endure a politically motivated trial. She fought hard to free France, not for fame or glory, but because she truly believed God had sent her. And since the age of 13, the voices of Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret had called her to lead the Dauphin Charles to his rightful throne. And she had done it against all odds. Imagine, she stood at the head of an army, her banner held high. She led the army that lifted the siege of Orleans. She stood alongside the Dauphin Charles as he was crowned king in Reims. Everything just as God had asked her. But now, that same king had completely abandoned her. For Saint Joan, the hardest part of her mission was just beginning. And it wasn't enough for her enemies to simply capture and execute her. They knew very well that the French people would see her as a martyr, an image that would inspire them to keep fighting for France's freedom. Their aim, the enemies, their aim was very clear. It was to publicly prove Saint Joan a heretic and a witch, accusing her of achieving victories through an alliance with the devil. And if they succeeded, it would mean that Charles VII's coronation had been influenced by a witch, thereby invalidating his legitimacy as king and shattering the heroic image of the Maid of France. The trial was overseen by Bishop Cochon of Beauvais, a Frenchman loyal, unfortunately, to the English, and was biased from the start. Saint Joan was accused of heresy and witchcraft. She faced relentless interrogations. Despite the intense pressure, she stood firm, refusing to renounce her visions or deny her divine mission. Though St. Joan's sharp answers often left her judges perplexed, and despite never falling into their traps or contradicting herself, the trial was never meant to be fair. From the start, her trial was carefully orchestrated with one goal in mind: to condemn her, not to uncover the truth. She was denied legal counsel. Every word that she spoke was twisted to fit the accusation of heresy, a verdict that had been decided long before she even entered the courtroom. Yet, St. Joan remained firm in her faith, displaying a sense of resilience. And when asked one time whether she was in the grace of God, the question that was meant to trick her, she simply replied, "If I am not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God keep me." Now, this simple yet profound answer revealed her humility and confidence in God's mercy. Despite these relentless attacks, St. Joan remained determined. "It is the truth that God sent me," she declared. They tried repeatedly to make her deny the voices and visions and admit that they were only dreams or tricks of the mind. But St. Joan stood strong. "My voices have not deceived me. They came from God. I have done everything according to His instructions." All her supernatural apparitions and prophecies were denounced as lies and deception. She was accused of fortune-telling, blasphemy, cruelty, vanity, idolatry, invoking evil spirits, and committing grave errors against the faith. Now we can just imagine how she must have felt. She was young. She was alone. So how did St. Joan respond to all this? She must have had uncertainty. It is part of being human. Something that we all experience, every one of us, when we're faced with some unknown, a danger, or some more difficult choices that we have to make. So how did she overcome her difficulties? The important thing is she did not rely on herself. She surrendered completely. And that's the key. True strength isn't about never feeling fear. It is about placing everything, absolutely everything, in the hands of God through the one who leads us to Him, and that is Mary Most Holy. Making your consecration to Jesus through Mary isn't just a nice devotion. It is the surest, safest, and fastest path to holiness. It is a shortcut that all of the saints, without exception, took. So, if you're tired of struggling on your own, if you're ready to take the easy path to holiness, to courage and victory, this is your invitation. Click the link in the description to start your free consecration journey. Do it today, right away. Don't wait. Now back to St. Joan. If St. Joan didn't have an unshakable faith, she would have given up and the fear would have knocked her out. Without faith, the voices of doubt, betrayal, and humiliation would have completely crushed her. But what was it that kept her standing, even when everything seemed to be lost? It was a certainty that she was not following her own will, but the will of God. Her courage wasn't hers. It was the consequence of believing that God was guiding her every step. It is faith that makes us invincible. Being brave is not the absence of fear. It is having faith in spite of the fear. This allows ordinary people to do extraordinary things in the face of adversity. It is about believing there is a greater purpose behind our actions. Now, this is true bravery. and it comes from faith. It is about choosing to move forward with fear, the fear still present, and trusting entirely in God. Now, how do we take that first step, even when everything inside of us wants us to turn around and run away? That's the secret that we will discover with my trusted magnifying glass. Saint Joan of Arc had the kind of faith where she not only believed in God's existence, but believed in his authority. And because of this faith, she became invincible. This is true faith. It is not just believing in doctrine or memorizing some article of the creed. True faith is believing in someone, trusting in God who speaks to us, guides us, and loves us, and is about surrendering ourselves completely to him. When St. Joan of Arc placed herself under God's authority, his strength became her own strength. This faith allowed her to see beyond that what human eyes could see, beyond the danger, the rejection, or even death. It was the armor that made her unstoppable. Not because she wouldn't suffer, but because no suffering could break her. Now, the secret of her bravery is not in herself, but in the one who gave her her mission. Once she believed with all her heart that she was sent by God, fear lost its power over her. A soul that lives under God's authority no longer asks, "What will happen to me?" But they only ask, "What does God ask of me?" And that is the kind of faith that makes a person invincible. With confidence, St. Joan proclaimed, "I would rather die than revoke what I have said by the order of God. I am not afraid. I was born to do this." When we feel afraid and alone, invoke Mary Most Holy, and she will come. She may not take away the suffering, but like a mother standing by her child, she will help us with what we need to endure that suffering. If you are looking for peace in your own life, entrust yourself completely to Mary through the consecration. Now, on May 30th, the year 1431, the Maid of France was led to the streets of Rouen to the marketplace, where a wooden stake had been prepared. Now, St. Joan wept, calling on God and the Blessed Virgin Mary, and confessing her faith until the very end. The crowd there gathered in silence, some even with tears in their eyes. Those miserables, they tied St. Joan to the wooden stake and lit the pyre. As the flames rose around her, her final cry echoed through the square. "Jésus, Jésus, Jesus, Jesus," in French. A soldier watching the execution murmured, "We have burned a saint." Witnesses reported that at the moment of her death, as the flames consumed her body, a white dove emerged from the fire, flying into the sky as she exhaled her last breath. Her death was a great act of faith and a final testament to her belief that she had served God's will. For many, her martyrdom was not the end, but the fulfillment of her divine mission. It is said that the flames could not burn her heart. So inflamed was her heart with love for Jesus. Her voices had not deceived her. They had promised her a great victory. It was not the victory that she had envisioned, but her martyrdom in the flames became her greatest triumph. St. Joan of Arc died at the age of 19, betrayed by men and condemned by the world. Denied burial in holy ground because of that heresy charge. So her ashes were thrown into the Seine River. But the truth cannot stay buried. Some years later, Charles VII, seeking to restore his own honor, of course, because he betrayed the one that brought him to the throne, he pushed for her sentence to be overturned. And in 1449, 18 years after Joan's death, the French recaptured Rouen, and Charles requested that the heresy ruling be reversed to protect his claim to the throne. In 1456, a trial of rehabilitation declared Saint Joan innocent. In 1920, the Catholic Church canonized her as a saint. And today, we all know, she is the patron saint of France. The voices of truth are always under attack. The world will try to twist what is good, mock what is holy, and silence those who speak with courage. St. Joan's story reminds us that standing for truth often means standing alone. She may have lost battles, her army, freedom, and her life, but she never lost her soul. Her faith made her invincible. And as we've uncovered, being brave doesn't come from a lack of fear, but it allows us to act in the midst of it. It is a strength to trust and have faith in something greater, even when fear is present. What truth is God asking you to defend, even if no one stands beside you? Like St. Joan, may we have the faith to say, I am not afraid. God is with me. This is her challenge for us today. Are we willing to stand for truth, trust in God, and follow his call? St. Joan of Arc's bravery came from a heart completely surrendered to God's will, and her story reminds us that true victory belongs to those who stand for what is right, no matter the cost. Like St. Joan, we too are born to fight for something greater. Now, will we rise to the challenge? If you ever fear losing a battle, don't worry, you're not alone. Together, we will uncover the way to never lose a fight, a forgotten truth that makes victory inevitable. It is the one virtue that ensures that you never lose where it matters the most. If you're ready to fight like a true warrior, you won't want to miss this next episode. So, until then, God bless and Salve Maria.